From our studios in Princeton, New Jersey, here's what we're sharing on today's Writers to Writers. We'll explore the ebook price war and what it means for all authors. We'll also take you on location to the New Jersey Romance Writers Conference. And we'll give you tips and advice on starting a writers group. It's all coming up right now. Hello and welcome to Writers2Writers. I'm Jennifer Sneed.
And I'm Keith Fritz. As always, we start with our Writers Reveal question.
This week, our question is, name an author, living or dead, that you'd like to meet, and also tell us one question you would ask that person. So Keith, go first.
Oh, well, it has to be Stephen King, my mentor and my hero, but what question to ask him? I finally boiled it down to this. The man has written so many novels over the years. If he would have the opportunity to go back and rewrite one and do it differently, which novel would that be, and of course, how would it come out?
Good question and conversation.
Yeah, I hope so. What about you?
So I would choose Ray Bradbury, one of my favorites.
Oh, another great choice.
And I think with everything that's going on right now with technology, I would love to have a discussion with him and hear his take on where we are today with digital versus print.
Oh, he is such a big person in the sci-fi realm,
Absolutely.
so that'd be very interesting to hear his perspective.
Now it's your turn. Tweet your response to us using the hashtag DreamAuthorQuestion or post it on our Facebook page.
We also asked a few writers to share their answers, and here's what they had to say.
If I could meet one author from the past, it would have to be H.P. Lovecraft. He had such a strange way of writing and strange topics. I would just like to ask him where those ideas came from.
The one author I would love to meet is Stephanie Lawrence. Even though I have corresponded with her, she has helped a lot on questions, especially like, do sex scenes get any easier to write? And she told me emphatically, no, they do not. I'd just love to be able to spend more time with her. She lives in Australia, so we haven't actually met face to face, but we've corresponded quite a few times.
I would love to meet Larry Niven. He's the one author I absolutely want to meet, because I want to ask him, how hard is it to work with Jerry Pournelle, and how hard is it to do those great books that he does?
The one author I'd really like to meet is Eckhart Tolle. And I guess I would ask him, how do you get there? Although he's covered that subject in his books, I really just have to read them over again and again to get there.
Amazon versus Hachette. You may have heard about the battle between these two conglomerates in the news. Authors unwillingly have been dragged into the middle and are paying a high price. The dispute is over ebook pricing. And while you may not have a book deal with Hachette, the outcome of this and other online publishing wars impact every author, as well as future authors.
So for those who may not understand what the conflict is all about, we want to discuss it and explore what exactly is at stake. Here to help us is Aram Sinnreich, assistant professor at Rutgers University School of Communication and Information, and author of The Piracy Crusade, How the Music Industry's War on Sharing Destroys Markets and Erodes Civil Liberties. Aram, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, so people need to understand now, we mentioned before that it's about the money and the power between Amazon and Hachette, and we know that has to deal with ebooks, but of course it's more complicated than that. Could you just give us a basic overview?
Yeah, sure. So Amazon is the biggest bookseller in the world. They sell about half the books in America and about 2/3 of the ebooks in America. That gives them a tremendous amount of power over the marketplace. Hachette is one of the big 5 publishers. They have historically enjoyed being the middleman between the authors and the consumers, and they've enjoyed the power of setting the prices and setting the terms by which consumers can gain access to books.
But now somebody else has that power.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is essentially a giant spitting war between 2 mega corporations.
So why is Amazon setting the price at $9.99? When they can get more than that. And what is Hachette? Why are they resisting?
Well, so my publisher calls it crack pricing, and the idea is that consumers have a magic price point below which they're willing to make an impulse buy. Now, when it comes to songs, that's 99 cents, and Steve Jobs pioneered that model when it came to the music industry. Okay. But when it comes to books, it's $9.99. Once we pass the $10 mark, all of a sudden we start to see the bills piling up in our eyes. So Amazon is very intelligently trying to set the bar at the sweet spot where consumers are going to be willing to buy the greatest number of ebooks because they perceive it as being at the lowest cost. So the basic idea is that even though we might be paying less, in aggregate, we the consumers are going to be paying more because we're going to be buying more books.
Okay.
Now,
how exactly is Amazon handling it? I understand they've had some kind of punitive measures against Hachette.
yeah, this is also inside baseball, but basically what Amazon has done is they've disallowed consumers from the ability to pre-order Hachette books on the site.
Oh.
And they've also not given the customary discount that a lot of newly released titles get, which means that the books on Amazon are going to be $10 or $15 more than you would find on a competing website like Kobo.com or Barnes & Noble. They've also made it more difficult to find the books in the searching interface and won't promote the books when consumers go to the Amazon homepage.
And they're not doing that for any other publishers, just Hachette.
No, this is just purely punitive, just messing with Hachette, basically flexing their muscles and trying to prove that they can, with a flip of a switch, interrupt Hachette's sales and diminish their revenues by a factor of 20 or 30%.
So this is hurting Hachette's sales. And so, Amazon, they offered royalties to authors? And how did, right? Am I wrong on
Yeah,
this?
well, so Amazon has proposed a kind of settlement where they go direct and they pay the author rather than paying Hachette and letting Hachette pay the author. Now, this has actually been happening again in the music industry where a lot of this stuff has been hashed out for the first time.
Sure.
Where you got a service like, for instance, Spotify, or Pandora, they don't always pay the record label and let the record label pay the artist. Under certain circumstances, they pay the artist directly. And that means that the artist gets more money in the long run because they don't have to wait around for the record label to make their money back. So the same thing is happening in books. Basically, Amazon is arguing that they're going to be a better middleman between the publisher and the reader than, between the author and the reader than the publisher can be. They're saying, we're going to give you, Mr. Author or Ms. Author, a bigger piece of the pie. We're going to give you, Mr. or Ms. Consumer, a lower cost. And you, Mr. and Ms. Publisher, you're a dinosaur and you can just kind of get out of here
Go away.
and leave us
So are
your
the
piece of
authors
pie.
okay with this? How did they take this or they respond?
Well, so the authors who are kind of accustomed to being the winners of the old school publishing industry have all banded together and they have a group called Authors United, where they're arguing that that the value of their work is being devalued by these machinations on Amazon's part. But then again, there are tens or hundreds of thousands of smaller publishers, publishers with independent presses, publishers who self-publish like yourself, for whom Amazon's like the greatest thing that ever happened. Because all of a sudden, it's not a question of whether your book's going to be on the bookshelf in the store. It's going to be a question of how easy your book is to find because the bookshelves are functionally infinite.
Yeah.
Right.
So, there's really, it's not like there's a single good guy and a single bad guy here.
Sure.
These are two different corporations, each of which wants to control that relationship between publisher and reader, and neither of which is really looking out for the best interests of either.
So I would say that the average author perspective is pretty much what you just said. Now, what about the average consumer? It certainly sounds, hey, I would love to get a cheaper price for a book.
Right.
But there's always more behind the scenes. Are there any, other sides of that? What are the pros and the cons of this situation?
Well, we have, as consumers, we've adapted very quickly to internet retail, and we've come to expect everything to be, Amazon is now experimenting with drones so they can bring you toilet paper while you're still sitting in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So there is this kind of sense that we want what we want, and we want it now, and we want it at the lowest possible price, and if we don't get that, we're going to jump ship and move to a different retailer. So in a way, Amazon's playing a dangerous game here. They're kind of playing a game of chicken, because if they make enough books expensive enough and difficult enough to find and deliver, consumers are going to start going elsewhere. They are going to start experimenting with those rival retailers, and Amazon might lose a little bit of its 50% of books or 65% of ebooks.
They're so big right now, though. I don't think that they're that worried about it.
No, because Amazon is not, books were kind of its avenue into online retail, but it's become a superstore.
That's true.
There's virtually no category of legal goods and services that you can't purchase through Amazon at this point. So books are a tiny little margin of their operating income.
So authors, though, should be concerned about this dispute, right? And what should they do to get involved in this?
Well, let me say right off the bat that this is not a unique problem to Hachette. Amazon has had these problems in the past. When my new book came out, I published my first two books with the University of Massachusetts Press. Not a giant Big Five publisher, but a professional publisher that is accustomed to being treated well by retailers. When my book came out, right around New Year's of this year, publisher was having, my publisher's distribution company was having its own pissing war with Amazon. And my book was not available on Amazon for most of the first 2 months that it was released, which significantly hurt my sales. So as an author, I'm very concerned about that. Now, that being said, I also love being an author on Amazon because, you know, most bookshops don't list my book because it's from an academic press and it's not for necessarily for a general audience. So what we want, I think, to speak for the entire class of book authors is to have a benevolent set of overlords who are in competition with one another and each want to do right by us to outdo the other player. And that makes both monopolies like Amazon and oligopolies like the big five publishers a problem, because in both cases they're too powerful, and ultimately they're not going to behave in a way that's in my best interest.
So are there specific actions that authors can take to join this movement?
Authors United you're talking about?
Well, you can join one of these groups. If you feel like you want to throw your hat in with the Hachette group, you could join Authors United. I think Amazon started a rival group called Readers United or something like that.
Of course.
But in reality, you're getting misinformation from both sides, right? The best thing that you can do is to try to unionize, try to lobby your congresspeople to sort out the rates at a congressional level so that the industries don't have to inside deal, and you know, try you know, what I would advise is lawyer up and try to get a good contract off the bat so that no matter what happens, you're protected.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for helping us out to understand some of the basics of this. I know a lot of our listeners are curious.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Aram.
Sure.
Lots of people have heard the saying, writing is rewriting, and I completely believe in that. So I am always telling other writers that don't worry about your first draft, worry about the revision. And I have a list of some really quick questions I always recommend a writer ask themselves when he or she finishes a scene. Go back and ask these questions and revise to the answers, and you'll have a stronger scene. You'll have a scene that's a keeper and not a sleeper, and you'll be mending your broken scene. So you finish your scene and you think, it's not quite right. You've got to listen to your gut. And there are some questions to help you figure out just what's wrong with it. The very first question I ask myself is, what does the character want when the scene starts? And how does he or she get it? Or even more importantly, how do they not get it? So it's just really important to understand your character's goal. If the main character of a scene doesn't have a goal in that scene, your reader's going to be a little bit bored. They want to know what he's after. The goal could be to get across the room. The goal could be to stop a murder, but there has to be a goal. I also ask writers to ask themselves, is there a stronger plot point for that scene? Sometimes we will write a long scene and all it really is a transition scene. What did they talk about between getting in the car and going to the restaurant? Skip it. If you can't find a stronger plot point for that scene, like there's an accident in the car on the way, then go right to the restaurant, skip the transition scene, and your reader will go with you. I always ask myself, can I make this scene unforgettable? Now, not every scene is going to be unforgettable, but I always try to have 2 or 3 or 4 scenes in a book that readers put down that book and they remember the shed scene, or they remember the shower scene, or they remember the moment that she told her mother the truth scene. They might not even remember the title of the book, but a certain scene will resonate, and that's the way you get a reader to come back for more. I always ask myself, am I doing the obvious? Am I doing exactly what the reader expects, and is there some way I can surprise them? And usually if I'm surprising myself as a writer, I'm surprising the reader, and often I'm surprising the character too. So you want to just keep things lively that way. Number 5 is, can I show the character's true nature and the true conflict? It's really easy to slip out of character when you're writing a character. You might think you know them in and out, but even your own day can affect how you're writing. So you look at the way you wrote and you say, did I keep that character true to character? Who this person is, am I showing it? And also, am I demonstrating the conflict in every scene? And I don't mean repeating the conflict, I just mean intensifying it. Number 6 is, this is one of my favorites. Can I make the scene ear? I-E-R. I know I write a funny book. Can I make it funnier? Can I make it scarier? Can I make it sexier? Whatever kind of genre, whatever type of book you're writing, look for ways to intensify that genre so that if someone picked up just that scene, they would know exactly what kind of book it is. Number 7, can a scene start later and end earlier? It's always good to get into the action as soon as you can and get out, leave them wanting more. Number 8, how can this scene be more emotional? Writing is about eliciting emotions from a reader. It's not just taking them on a story. It's not just showing them what happens as a character goes from point A to point B. They have to feel something. So I look at the end of every scene and I say, did my reader feel something? Did they want to shed a tear? Did they laugh? Did they sigh? Did they get mad? That's what you want to do with a powerful book. Number 9, do I really need this scene in the book? Ooh, you know what? You'd be surprised how many scenes can be covered with one sentence in the next scene, and you can move into something that's more exciting for the reader. And last, is this scene written in the right point of view for the most emotional impact? Because I write genre fiction, we don't write an omniscient point of view. We write in a character's head. And you want to pick the character who has the most at stake in that scene. Maybe it's not the one who's revealing his big secret. Maybe the one who has the most at stake is the person learning his big secret. You as the writer have to make that decision and choose the point of view that has the most emotional impact. Once you go through those 10 questions and you answer them honestly, I'm pretty sure you can mend your broken scene.
Many of the authors who've appeared on our show have talked about how important their writers groups are, how they've had a positive impact on their writing.
I myself run a bi-weekly writing group, and it's because of the experiences I've had with other writers who have come to my group, and of course groups that I've gone to, that has actually helped me to complete several of my novels. But perhaps you live in an area where there aren't a lot of choices for writing groups. Maybe you even long for one that's a little bit more tailored to your specific needs. So now you're toying with the idea of starting your own group.
Here with some tips on establishing a writers group and how to make it successful and lasting is Todd Greenwood. Todd is a writer and also leads the Princeton Writers Room, a group in existence for 8 years. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you, thank you.
We're pleased to have you.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different writing groups out there.
Yep.
So let's start with, how are these formats? What are the types of formats that can be offered within these groups?
Well, I've visited a number of different groups, and certainly the group that I run, what we do is we're sharing work around the room. So we're all peers, we're all writers, we're reading our work, we're reading it aloud to the group, and then the group is commenting on what they heard and where those improvements are. And that's one type of format. Okay. Another type of format is actually the format of the group that you run, Keith, yep, which is where people are coming into the room with the express purpose of actually writing in the time period of the group. You know, and that's very effective because there's something about people who are working together on writing that actually creates a concentrated
energy.
Spirit and energy that you're actually generating stuff that you wouldn't otherwise in that period of time.
I've called it being around like-minded people. I've said it a few times on the show as well. It really is very, very important.
Exactly. But it's not only that, but it's that energy, that concentrated energy. A third type would be where people are talking about writing. They're talking about the craft of writing. They may be sharing books or tips about writing. Or they may be sharing books that they love that actually exemplify the kind of writing that they want to be doing. And then groups do all kinds of mixtures of those, and that's what you find. Yeah.
Okay, so what would you recommend people that want to start their own group? They have one of those ideas in mind or a little connection thereof. What kind of parameters would you have them work with in organizing, like the time frame, maybe the duration in the meeting?
Yeah, sure.
Any kind of thing like that?
There are no rules, but what we do is we have 2 hours, and sometimes 2 hours seems like it's not enough, but quite honestly, I think that people tune out after 2 hours. So, I think it can be too long. So I think, an hour and a half is probably the minimum, 2.5 hours is the max, so nice is about 2 hours. I would say that, you want to certainly meet in the same place each time. You want to have a comfortable spot where people meet. I know there are groups that just go from one living room to another and round robin, and that works. What we do with the Writers' Room is we're hosted by the Princeton Public Library, and that has advantages and disadvantages. One advantage is, there's free space and it's there, and we have a ready community of writers. We live in a community of writers, so they come flowing in to the library, and and that's sort of where the disadvantage is, because you can't gauge necessarily
there's hit or miss. Sometimes it's overwhelming. I know you've had times when you didn't have enough chairs in the room, and other times you're waiting for somebody else to come in the door so you can get some help, and it just didn't happen.
Exactly. So what I was going to say is that one of the things that we're doing during those 2 hours, again, is people are sharing. So it's really the real difficulty is, how do you make sure that you're maximizing the time, that you're giving everyone a chance, and that those people who don't have a chance to read and share have a chance the next time.
Very good points. Now, what makes a good facilitator or leader of these groups?
Oh, just look at me.
Well, we could tell right off the bat, but we would like elaborate slightly for us.
I think that a good a good facilitator is someone who is a good listener, but is listening for those, for positivity, because that's what we want. I think we want to make sure, and I hate this, if I go to a group and suddenly, half of the time is being expended on one person. So you want to be able to move the group along in a way that, you're really maximizing the time without cutting people off, but on the other hand, knowing that you're not going to be able to get lots of voices in and lots of work in unless, time is really there at your side.
I know, having done it a few times, it becomes important to know that it might not be my turn tonight. And for a new writer, a new person coming into the group, they kind of expect that. So that's something else that you have to do as a leader. Okay, there's a new guy, got to make sure that he gets his, few cents in. What about actually doing critiquing? What kinds of advice would you give? Because I know that's one of the more common, one of the kinds of things people think of when they say what a writing group is.
We've gone through a couple of different, I would say, iterations, different kind of evolution with how to do critiquing. In the beginning, the group was all creative nonfiction. So we were looking at critiquing from the perspective of really that of the emotional truth. We would say, where is the emotional truth in this work? But it was too constraining. First of all, we had people who were knocking on the door who were saying, I'm doing fiction, I'm doing playwriting, I'm doing poetry, I want to come in and I want to be part of this. So we said, great, let's open up the doors and allow everyone in. So then, that then begged the question, well, then how do you do critiquing?
People have different skill sets walking in the door.
So one of the things that I thought made a lot of sense was to ask the writers themselves to provide the focus question, because the other part of it is every writer is in a different place when they come into that room in terms of what their work is about, where their work is in its completeness and its evolution. And so the best person to really know what it is that they need is the writer, him or herself. So to ask the writer, what is it that you want? What is it that you feel is, the key question?
Right.
What is it that you want to hear?
And it focuses the rest of the group as well, rather than some people working on grammatical issues, some people looking at, sentence structure and other things. If there's one specific question, it really helps the focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have lots more to ask you, but not enough time. So I think joining a writers group maybe is the solution.
Yeah,
we certainly appreciate your time and lots of great tips for our viewers.
Thanks so much for coming in, Todd.
You're welcome.
Give your writing the boost it needs by joining one of these genre-specific writing groups in your area. The Garden State Speculative Writers, also known as the GSSW Writers Group, invites writers of horror, suspense, mystery, science fiction, and other genres to join them at one of their meetings or critique groups. They meet monthly at the Old Bridge Public Library in Old Bridge. If romance is your writing genre of choice, consider joining the New Jersey Romance Writers. They offer monthly meetings that include hands-on workshops, as well as the opportunity to hear from award-winning authors and from industry professionals. They meet at the Woodbridge Hilton in Island. And if you're interested in writing your own story, meet with others at the Memoir Writing Group in Lawrenceville. They meet weekly on Tuesdays at 2:30 at the Mercer County Library. It's an ongoing program open to new members. You can contact the library for additional details. For more information on these and other writers groups, or to have your writers group listed, go to our website at Writers2Writers.com.
Thanks so much for spending this time with us.
We'll see you next time for more Writers to Writers.